Every family has things left unsaid, secrets kept carefully behind closed doors, resentments that never quite make it into the holiday group chat. But what happens when the very people who raised you, who loved you before the world even knew your name, decide they've been silent long enough? Thomas Markle, Doria Ragland, and Samantha Markle are three individuals who know the real Meghan better than almost anyone alive. And now, each of them is speaking up. What they're revealing completely dismantles the fairy tale we've all been handed. This isn't simply a story about a family growing distant. It's about an illusion that was carefully engineered. And what you're about to hear will shift everything you thought you understood. From the outside looking in, the narrative appeared flawless. We saw radiant smiles, heartfelt public tributes, and the unmistakable image of a proud, tightly bonded family. But Thomas Markle insists that what the public witnessed was nothing more than a masterful performance. Picture what it truly feels like to pick up your phone, dial your own daughter, and be met with nothing but a hollow, endless silence. No shouting match, no dramatic confrontation, just emptiness. Thomas says that silence became part of his everyday life. He watched the little girl he raised, the daughter he claims he sacrificed his career and comfort for, evolve into a global figure. And yet, he found himself completely shut out of her world. It wasn't just emotional distance. It was navigating layers of assistance and intermediaries simply to request a basic phone call. Publicly, she spoke about gratitude and the importance of family. Privately, Thomas alleges that the connection was staged for the cameras, disappearing the moment someone called, "Cut." But Thomas's heartbreak, according to these accounts, was only the beginning of a deeper and more troubling pattern. If the idea of a father being pushed aside is frustrating, what reportedly happened with her mother may leave you stunned. Doria Ragland appeared to embody quiet strength. She was the poised, elegant mother standing beside her daughter during life's most pivotal moments. The world embraced their bond, seeing it as the steady anchor of authenticity amid royal turbulence. Yet behind those perfectly framed photographs, Doria's reality was allegedly far more complicated. The closeness displayed publicly wasn't exactly mirrored in private. According to these claims, visits didn't just slow down. They became meticulously scheduled. Not the kind of scheduling that comes with everyday busyness, but the kind that requires formal booking. Imagine a mother having to secure an appointment to see her own child. Reportedly, Doria was treated less like a parent and more like a carefully placed element in a larger production. When public events called for the optics of a loving, supportive family, she was smoothly positioned in the frame. The warmth was visible. The smiles were bright. The cameras captured precisely what they needed. But once the flashes faded, the dynamic allegedly shifted just as quickly. Access, it seems, wasn't guaranteed by love. It had to be timed, managed, and approved. And if a mother could be reduced to a calendar entry, it raises questions about how the rest of the family was treated. Most people have that one sibling who truly understands, the one who shared the awkward years, the private jokes, and the quiet, ordinary memories no one else remembers. For Meghan, that person was supposed to be Samantha. They grew up in the same home, connected by a shared history that should have been unbreakable. But when fame entered the picture, Samantha says the foundation began to fracture. At first, the shift was subtle. Fewer invitations, shorter conversations. Then gradually, every interaction felt carefully filtered and controlled. The sister she once knew seemed to disappear, replaced by someone she had to cautiously navigate. Eventually, Samantha claims she wasn't even communicating with her sister directly anymore. Messages were funneled through other people. What followed felt like a calculated freeze-out, an effort to erase the complicated reality of their upbringing and replace it with a polished, PR-approved backstory. Yet the most unsettling part, she says, wasn't the silence. It was the performance. Samantha watched as a version of their family story, one she describes as entirely fabricated, was presented to millions. Each public gesture, every emotional interview about family hardship felt less spontaneous and more strategically designed. According to Samantha, these weren't simple misunderstandings. They were deliberate decisions, choices made to protect an image rather than preserve authenticity. Genuine closeness never had the opportunity to survive because whenever an unfiltered moment could surface, the carefully managed Hollywood narrative stepped in to replace it. She wasn't just excluded. In her view, she was written out and substituted with a fictional storyline that played better on television. And that realization leads to perhaps the most compelling piece of this entire situation. Thomas, Doria, and Samantha are not operating as a unified team. They aren't coordinating statements. They don't share a collective strategy. In fact, their own relationships with one another are layered and complicated. A father, a mother, a sister. Three individuals who encountered this global superstar from entirely different vantage points. And yet, without collaborating or comparing notes, they've all reached the same unsettling conclusion. The public was sold a flawless illusion, while the people who loved her the longest were left navigating something transactional, controlled, and deeply managed. When three separate voices independently describe an identical pattern of calculated isolation, it stops sounding like gossip. It starts to feel like something far more concrete, something difficult to dismiss. To truly grasp how an entire family can be erased from a worldwide narrative, you have to return to the precise moment the door finally slammed shut. So let's go back to the days leading up to the 2018 royal wedding. The world was watching. Media attention was at a fever pitch. And Thomas Markle suddenly found himself under a spotlight he neither sought nor fully understood. Then came the now infamous paparazzi photos. We all remember them. Thomas reading a book about Britain in a cafe, being fitted for a suit, lifting weights in preparation for the big day. On the surface, it looked like a father harmlessly preparing for his daughter's wedding. But that surface-level story didn't last long. When security footage allegedly revealed Thomas coordinating with a photographer to stage those shots, the narrative flipped almost instantly. Overnight, he went from overwhelmed parent to public liability. What often gets overlooked, however, is the panic that reportedly drove him there. Thomas claims he was being relentlessly hounded by the press, his privacy shattered, while receiving no protection from the palace's powerful PR apparatus that was fiercely shielding his daughter. Acting on poor advice, he agreed to stage the photos in a desperate attempt to regain some control over his public image. Instead, it handed the institution exactly what it needed, a reason to sever ties. When the stress surrounding the scandal reportedly led to a major heart attack, preventing him from attending the wedding, the silence that followed from his daughter's side didn't just feel distant. To him, it felt deliberate, and what unfolded afterward stunned even seasoned observers. Not long after the wedding, several anonymous friends of Meghan gave an exclusive interview to a major magazine. In it, they described a devastated daughter who had written her father a painfully private letter, pleading with him to stop engaging with the press. It was a strategic PR moment that cast Thomas in a deeply unstable light. But Thomas says he had proof. Frustrated by what he believed was a distorted narrative shaped by unnamed sources, he released portions of that very letter to the media, arguing that the article had misrepresented its tone and intent. This wasn't an emotional plea from a heartbroken daughter, he insisted. It read more like a calculated legal document meant to position me a certain way. That single decision ignited one of the most intense legal showdowns in modern British media history. Meghan sued the publication for printing the private letter, calling it a serious invasion of privacy. Yet as the court proceedings unfolded, cracks began forming in the carefully maintained image. Text messages and emails surfaced during the case, leading Meghan's team to acknowledge that they had cooperated with the authors of a highly flattering biography about her life, something that had previously been strongly denied. Court documents suggested the possibility that the letter to her father may have been written with awareness that it could one day become public. Allegedly, every phrase, every emotional appeal was crafted with potential readership in mind. For Thomas, that realization was devastating. He came to believe he wasn't communicating with his daughter anymore. He was interacting with a brand, and he wasn't the only one who felt their shared history was being revised in real time. When Meghan and Harry sat down for the explosive Oprah interview, millions tuned in to hear their perspective. But as Samantha Markle watched from home, she says it felt less like truth and more like fiction. During that conversation, Meghan remarked that she essentially grew up as an only child. For Samantha, who shared a home, a father, and years of childhood memories with her, those words cut deeply. Growing apart from a sibling is one thing. Publicly erasing their presence from your life story on international television is another entirely. Samantha chose not to remain silent. She filed a substantial defamation lawsuit against her sister, arguing that the only child statement, along with claims made in the explosive Netflix documentary series, were not merely hurtful, they were strategically damaging. The lawsuit alleged that Meghan orchestrated a global effort to portray her as dishonest and opportunistic in order to preserve the rags to royalty narrative. Although the court ultimately dismissed the case, citing opinion and free speech protections, the public scrutiny it generated lingered. The legal battle prompted many to examine inconsistencies within the broader story. Why would someone feel the need to significantly reshape their childhood narrative unless certain truths didn't align with the image being presented? And then there's perhaps the most enigmatic figure in all of this, Doria. For years, Doria Ragland was regarded as the ultimate vault. She didn't speak to tabloids. She didn't leak stories. She carried herself with quiet composure and unwavering dignity. But when the multi-million-dollar Netflix documentary premiered, that silence shifted. For the first time on such a massive platform, Doria sat before the cameras and shared her version of events. But almost immediately, body language analysts, royal insiders, and even everyday viewers picked up on something unsettling. Her delivery came across as highly polished, almost overly rehearsed. She used familiar industry buzzwords that sounded strikingly similar to the carefully refined language found in her daughter's public speeches. That observation ignited a storm of speculation. Rumors began circulating that Doria's sudden presence within the Archewell business structure wasn't simply about staying close as family. Hollywood whispers suggested it may have been a calculated strategy to guarantee unwavering loyalty, complete with airtight NDAs and tightly controlled messaging. So the question lingered, was Doria genuinely sharing her truth, or was she delivering carefully prepared lines? When you examine the timeline, the pattern becomes hard to ignore. The occasions when Doria was permitted to speak publicly or step into the spotlight seemed to align perfectly with moments when the Archewell brand needed an infusion of authenticity. It creates an unsettling image, a mother who may have exchanged a natural relationship with her daughter for a role in a high-stakes corporate production. And perhaps the most difficult part of all this is the human toll behind the production. As the years have passed, the PR machine appears to have only strengthened, but the real people caught in its wake seem to be fading into the background. Recently, Thomas Markle suffered a severe stroke that left him struggling even to speak. It was a frightening medical crisis that made headlines around the world. If there were ever a moment to end the estrangement, to let go of grievances and quietly reconnect, this seemed like it. Yet, according to him, the phone in his hospital room remained silent. No discreet visits, no private gestures, no quiet attempts at reconciliation. Just the same heavy silence that has followed him since the wedding day. And that's where the glittering illusion begins to fracture. You can hire the most elite public relations team's money can buy. You can secure multi-million-dollar streaming deals to present your narrative. You can sit in a manicured garden and speak about healing, compassion, and finding your voice. But ultimately, actions carry more weight than even the most perfectly crafted script. Thomas, Samantha, even the carefully managed image of Doria, they represent the chapters of a life that couldn't be neatly wrapped and sold. They were complicated. They were imperfect. They were real. And they didn't align with the sleek image of a modern royal renegade. So, according to these claims, they were sidelined, silenced, or rewritten altogether. When you zoom out and take in the scale of the fallout, it's staggering. A father who says he was set up and discarded. A sister who went to court just to assert her place in her own family story. A mother whose public appearances seem synchronized with a corporate calendar. The story presented to the world was one of a courageous woman escaping a toxic institution to safeguard her loved ones. But the people who share her blood are asking a far more unsettling question. If the institution was so corrosive, why replicate its most ruthless strategies to remove your own family? That question forces a reevaluation of everything, every interview, every podcast, every emotional documentary scene. If someone can look directly into a camera and publicly erase the people who raised them, what else could be constructed for the sake of image? The Markle family saga isn't simply a fairy tale that fell apart. It may be a case study in modern narrative control. And as more people begin peeking behind the curtain, you have to wonder how long any performance can continue before the audience decides to leave the theater. The image of the grounded, relatable woman standing up to the establishment was powerful. It resonated with millions and built an empire. But as the carefully built walls surrounding that empire begin to show cracks, what remains is the fallout, and the people left outside of it. Fame changes people. That much is undeniable. But transforming your own family into supporting characters for a public storyline is something entirely different. It raises one final question. When the cameras stop rolling and there's no narrative left to manage, who is actually still standing in the room? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you believe the family's perspective? Or is this simply the cost of marrying into one of the most powerful institutions in the world?